Oh my God, people, I'm reading. If you come back later. All right. The Republic of New Africa's identification as a colonized nation has promoted its citizens to form alliances with peoples who claim their land was stolen or unjustly occupied by an imperial force, whereby compelling them to seek sovereignty, restitution, and or independence. The provincial government, Republic of New Africa, states in its code of Umoja, quote, "It shall be the policy of the provisional government to recognize the just claims of the American indigenous nations and other oppressed nations for land in North America. It shall be the policy of the provisional government to negotiate with the American indigenous nations the claims which conflict with the claims of New African nation, and to resolve these claims in the spirit of justice, brotherhood, and mutual revolutionary commitment to human and natural rights for all oppressed nations in North America. Given New African self-identification as paper citizens of the United States, it comes as no surprise that the Republic of New African Declaration of Independence, Creed, and other such documents emphasize New Africans' respect for and support of other oppressed groups' rights to self-determination and struggles for liberation in the United States and abroad. As indicated in the passage cited from the Code of Umoja, New Africans were especially pressed to make negotiations with indigenous nations whose claims to land precede those of the Republic of New Africa. I'm going to be right back. I'm going to get me a water. Everybody, forgive me. I'm going to get me a water. Rufus, stay. Water, good. A reminder to everybody that hasn't drank water yet, drink water, eat some food. As part of the recognition of indigenous struggles and just demands of Republic of New Africa have often used precedents set by treaties between Native Americans and the United States to argue for New African liberation and strategize ways. I got a drop on my glasses. Don't you hate when you get, like, if you have glasses, you have that one little spot on there? I hate it. All right, back to it. Where was I? Let's reread it. Sorry. As part of their recognition of indigenous struggles and just demands of the Republic of New Africa, has often used precedents set by treaties between Native Americans and the United States to argue for New African liberation and to strategize ways to create new communities within the bounds of the U.S. law. Also, periodically, like the New African Journal, occasionally ran sympathetic articles reporting on the historical and contemporary struggles of indigenous people have faced. One notable article, the author detailed various ways that the Bureau of Indigenous Affairs curtailed the sovereignty and self-determination of indigenous people through its policies on elections, education, and reservations, characterizing their struggles as, quote, war. The author sought to draw parallels between indigenous people and New African battles against their common oppressors. The DC unit of the PG issued a statement supporting, quote, the liberation struggles of the indigenous peoples of North America and proclaiming New Africans and Native people, quote, shall dwell on the land on prosperity and harmony. A public display reinforced such messaging. During the demonstrations marked the bicentennial of the United States of America, Black liberation forces and indigenous activists agreed to demonstrate their solidarity by marching side by side, holding visual markers and their common goal while parading through a North Philadelphia neighborhood. Further, there is some evidence that the provincial government, Republic of New African officers, initiated concrete dialogues and negotiations with indigenous people as New Africans anticipated acquisition of land in the 5 states. One letter from the former PG Minister of Foreign Affairs, Kwame Asiegawi-Ifio Kalamaria, to Robert Rembindio and of the Leonard Peltier Defense Committee exemplifies ongoing engagement between representatives from both movements. Robin Daou also wrote a statement of support for the national, the New African Independence Movement, which the New African published. See, they're talking, they're doing coalitions, they're coming up with things. See, they're engaging in the indigenous movement. They're engaging in with them and fighting alongside them. Similarly, the Republican New African activists and the Puerto Rican liberation fighters have had some contact and shows of solidarity. In mutually amicable statements, Raphael Conseil Mirade and Amir Obidel identified the rights of New Africans and Puerto Ricans to land and independency. The Republic of New African articles exclaim, quote, "Free Puerto Rico," and praising the actions of people such as Marie Torres or Oscar Colazo or Laiota Lebram Litter New African publication. One article lists the various actions Puerto Ricans carried out in the name of independence. What is more, the article expressed solidarity by detailing the repressive actions committed against Puerto Rican liberationists and once again drawing parallels between New African liberation and global revolution against forces of imperialism. Amida Abi Kaifmi articulated this point in 1981. I'm gonna look down. Well, there's some kids are out there screaming. Just making sure in case no one is doing anything weird. All right, good. After explaining some of the histories of comradeship between various oppressed groups in the United States, he called for them to continue working together towards their common goals. He explained that the New African effort to, quote, free the land was interconnected with the claims of their Native Americans, Chicano Mexicanos, and Puerto Rican comrades. It was a goal that these oppressed nations would work towards a partnership of solidarity. As non-citizens of the United States, New Africans vocally supported many other struggles for self-determination and independence since its founding in 1968. Even though New Africans penchant or thinking of their own liberation in terms of global revolution fit neatly with the mood of the mood of Black Power era. This tendencies nuances distinguish New Africans' objectives from those of their contemporaries. New Africans argue that a worldwide revolution against colonialism, imperialism, and white supremacy would shift both the world economic structure and the very organization of U.S. society. Though their solutions to race relations, poverty, education, and many other issues fell within the spectrum of socialist perspectives popular at the time, New Africans diverged from the contemporaries insofar as they problematized inclusion within American society. Instead, they argue that black power and socialism could be achieved only when new African people control their own sovereignty and independent territory, and the Republic of New Africa. Thank you, gifters. I appreciate you. I appreciate people helping out. See, so like a brief little thing. They are in coalitions. They are in struggles. They are in talks with indigenous nations and also other nations that are colonized, like Puerto Ricans, because Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States. This is literally not NatSoc shit. Shut the fuck up. Jesus, Benji. This is not NatSoc shit. Read the book. Building on an international tradition of black struggles against racism and colonialism, Republican New African activists framed their movement as one that sought to overthrow oppression everywhere it exists. In doing so, they put forth an alternate interpretation of black power slogans and concepts alongside the rhetoric of community control and socialist revolution. New Africans engage in a serious discussion about their very place in society, including whether African descended people in the United States should fight for, quote, first-class citizenship or pursue self-determination. The New African perspective on this issue guided and justified their struggles for independence, influenced with whom they formed alliances, and determined to a major degree how they approach an attainment of their goal. Indeed, New Africans' convictions that the actualization of their revolution depends on their ability to gain recognition within United Nations highlights and dimensions of Black Power movement that continues to hold relevance for modern day activists. New Africans' determination to obtain Black Power guided by practice of their theory. However, living according to the NAPS, which is, we're going to find out what the NAPS is. I just think I have another person in here. Who is in here? The NAPS. What are the NAPS? This is the New African Political Science. Presented limitations due to the Republican New Africans' long-standing and ongoing captivity. In other words, New African citizens' attempts to enact political autonomy were bound by the laws of the United States. Although they could not fully exercise Republican New African citizenship, New Africans found other ways to empower themselves. They identified as a diasporic African nation that exists as part of the revolutionary developing world. This identification encouraged New Africans to forge alliances with other oppressed groups. In addition to the effort aimed at securing independence, New Africans operationalized more personal tactics to empower themselves. And that's in the chapter 3. Wow, that was pretty good. In the chapter 3. Oh my God. That was horrible. How are there? Wow. Not majority white. Sorry, incorrect. Hey, John Brown. So we're on chapter 3 now. Revolutionary name choices. Self-definition and self-determination. What I'm getting here, what I can make an inquiry on, is that usually Africans, I've heard, have two names they go by: their African name or their name that they're given because United States. But like they take off the name that the slave masters gave them for their own name that they were stripped from. Like my therapist has I think has an African name, which is amazing, and I need to continue to try to say it over and over again, because sometimes it's just like words that are put together, certain letters that are put together, I don't know how to pronounce them. And that's my fault. I need more practice. It seems that the Afro-American tradition of bestowing meaningful names on children has gone full circle. Original African names that were taken away by slave masters are returning in increasing numbers with the conscious affirmation of Afro-American culture, the result of black people's newly revived pride in their genetic and cultural roots. Awesome. That was Sheila S. Walker, Ebony, 1977. The naming ceremony in which Richard Trace participated began with a libation. What is this word? Let me look up this word, everybody. Be right back. Was libation. To perform this rite, Amir Obadel spoke the names of powerful predecessors and probably invited other participants to call on the names of their forebears. Brother Amir then poured water either into the ground or into a plant between the chanting of each name and at other points in the procedures. After the completion of this ritual, he bequeathed Trice and others newly pledging alliance to the Republic of New Africa with a name. Leaders selected names for recently enlisted New Africans based on the qualities they noticed in the students who were completing nation-building classes. Or I just missed it. At 15 years old, Trace became Bukuaba Wutu Egentia, an appellation that signifies, quote, one who struggles for a beautiful nation, end quote. By accepting it, Trace acknowledged his symbolic departure from his former existence and his commitment to a new life, quote, an African revolutionary, end quote. To end the ceremony, Trace and his cohort sipped from the unity cup and chanted Harmony, a Swahili for let's all pull together, in unison 7 times, thus signifying the importance of pulling individuals together in service to their larger group. At the conclusion of the formal service, drummers sent rhythmic messages to participants and guests who enjoyed food and fellowship in celebration in this newly committed group of New African freedom fighters. The New African Political Science, NAPS, stipulates that before the black nation can achieve statehood, black people must become true and conscious New Africans. Part of that transformation includes internalizing new African ideas and theories and developing a mindset that embraces self-determination rather than assimilation into a dominant society. Amazing. Thank you for put those in so that everybody knows what I'm talking about. Himrambe. See? The revolutionary practice of being New African presented itself in various aspects of the Republic of New African activists' daily lives, including name choices and name adoptions like that described by Trace, served as an outward display of the internal metamorphosis that many people experience when they committed themselves to the mission of black liberation. The name ceremony has a public graduation and sort of a provisional government Republic of New African PGRNA, hosted periodically to celebrate its growing cadres and to present them to the broader black community. During the 1960s, let's work back just in case. Okay, cool. During the 1960s and 1970s, black people across the United States engaged in this discourses about their African heritage and debated whether or how their ancestry should inform their present lives, along with clothing, hair, and relationship within families and communities. The topic of nomenclature proved popular. It was an aspect of life in which black folks could easily exercise control, following a long tradition of choosing designations that provided African descendant people with the means of self-definition. Black Power era naming practices sought to empower them. Through their name choices, they sought to reconcile their African heritage with, quote, new world realities. New Africans who shed their, quote, slave names exhibited a consciousness that recognized the ancestral connections and neo-colonial conditions they shared to some extent with African worldwide, while remaining attentive to the specificities of their local political conditions. For New Africans, then, name choices were among the most basic display of self-determination in lifestyle politics. It is important to ask how and why some New African perceived assuming of African names as an external manifestation of internal cognitive liberation for African hegemony. I can see how, like, you shedding a name that was given to your family by slave owners can be a way. I can see this. Not completely, but I can see this. How this can be liberating. Here, the term, quote, African name denotes identifiers that activists adopted from a range of African languages and cultures and or from Arabic. In some cases, an African name may be made up, but inspired by what an individual learned about Africa. At the same time, many New Africans maintained their slave names in part or in full. The term, quote, slave name typically indicates the ablation given to an enslaved person who by the enslaver and or in a tradition of the slaveholder's culture. Slave names intentionally cut their bearers off from ancestral lands and kin ties. Many slaveholders oh my gosh, I don't know if I can say this word. Let me go look up what this word says before I say it. Whew, okay, it's denigrated. My bad. Denigrated. Where was I at? Where was I at? Many slaveholders denigrated enslaved. Many slaveholders denigrated enslaved peoples through naming, either by the nature or and process in which designations were given, or because actual names themselves were intended to invective. I gotta look up another word. Sorry, everybody. No. Here we go. It was invectives. Invectives for the dehumanized. In this context, slave names refer to European designations, originally forced upon bound bound Africans or taking by them in their attempts to assimilate or protect themselves from violence and discriminations during and after chattel slavery. Even in some, just make sure. Just want to make sure. What page are we on? I'm on page 98. Sorry, I didn't see that. 98. Even in some, New Africans decided not to take on a new name or alter the names according them at birth. They accepted the group moniker New African. This collective designation, along with many activists' personal names, conveyed an idea that Republican New African citizens constituted a nation distinct from, though connected with, African-descended people in other regions of the world. Conscious citizens saw their struggle for independence as part of the broader revolution that would liberate African people and developing world more broadly. Put differently, name choices made up one of the most basic and mundane aspects of lifestyle politics, and it confirmed that revolutionary activism was a comprehensive process that transformed individual people even as they struggled to bring to fruition their version of a post-colonial futuridity. Although the logic behind name changes seems simple, Black people wanted to psychologically rid themselves of their oppressor culture, practices, and identity more closely with their ancestors. This brief survey of New Africans' resolution to alter maintain their names demonstrates the complexity of naming. Choosing one's name comprised one action of self-determination in a broader process of mental decolonization. Even then, even when cloaked in religious ideas and symbolism, name choices indicate a deep-seated disapproval of a mafia, which placed many Africans in the United States, where they experienced super exploitation, first through the international system of enslavement, then through the anti-Black terrorism, and even after the advent of legal equality with the dominant racial groups through continuing political and economic oppression. Though not the sole indicator of or a necessary step towards New African liberation, the adoption of African names presents the most obvious manifestation of that process and provides a gateway into the complexities of lifestyle politics. Dominating is one of the most basic and fundamental actions carried out by New Africans in their broader pursuit of individuals and group self-determination through revolutionary activism. Real quick, let me take something. Not that one. Okay, hold on a second. All right. What's in a name? Onomastic. I can't say this name. I'll be right back, everybody. Ononastic. It's basically naming of traditional names of certain things. So, omonastic. All right. The omonastic and African history in the United States. The literature on naming practices forms a dynamic and useful field of study that provides scholars an opportunity to explore activism using avenues that heretofore remained under investigated. under-investigated. In addition to attracting the attention of scholars from across several disciplines, monastic studies cover an impressive range of issues. Several texts focus on the appellations. Let me look at this word again. God damn, the word. Yeah, I'm right. Appellations. Yep. Appellations people choose for themselves and their children. The various reasons people select certain designations and where and how specific adopted names originate. These texts discuss the conscious and unconscious motives behind naming and whether or how the names influence bearers, personalities, and ambitions. Some studies focus on African American history and the correlation between enslavement of African descendants' names. Such analysis highlights how enslavers deployed nomenclature that attempts to cut Africans off from their ancestral lands, kin ties, and cultural knowledge, as well as to assert control over their human property. They also pinpoint ways that Africans used naming from their earliest moments in the Western world, both to assimilate into the dominant culture and to create unique designations that emphasized individuality and Africanity. That doesn't make sense. Individuality and Africanity, while establishing new kinship bonds. Some scholarly literature on black naming traditions emphasize African culture retentions of American culture. Further, some scholars have begun researching the large numbers of African Americans unconsciously looking towards Africa for inspirations in their naming practices during the 1960s and 1970s. Never give up. Taking together these studies help contextualize new African practices of naming during the Black Power era. The sheer volume of scholarships that analyze names from myriad cultures and various times and places indicates that human beings value names more than just labels that identify one individual from another. Names often represent a, quote, verbal signal of a person's whole identity, his or her being in the world as a distinct person, end quote. A name may identify one's class status, region and origin, and date of birth. It also potentially equates to a person's spiritual essence and connects each person to ancestors. On the psychological level, personal designation communicate affirming the detrimental connotations that may affect self-esteem and personal development. Thank you, I appreciate you. The political struggles for black liberation, names garnered particular importance because of the context in which most African Americans came to inherit their personal and family names. Human traffickers brought captive Africans to what is now the United States. After being stolen from their ancestral lands, alienated from their families, sold and shipped like cargo across the Atlantic Ocean, and sometimes held over in the Caribbean, the enslaved endured the process of someone marking them as subhuman, partially through denaming and renaming. Europeans may have sold an individual repeatedly, renaming that person with each sale. Historian Sterling Stuckey Stuckey argues that the acts of stripping enslaved people of their personal names and saddling them with unfamiliar and often denigrating one's produce traumatic psychological changes and revealed the absolute spite with each European enslavers viewed them. In discussing the implications of denying the entire people their group names, Stuckey claims that, quote, the act of denying a whole people their names and giving them new ones in the new language, and only partial names at that, as they did not typically receive their last names, must be regarded as a serious act of aggression, as a reflection of their subordinate state. Both enslaved and, quote, free Africans were actively aware of this violent arrangement. The U.S. black population combated this fierce renaming through a variety of self-determined monastic practices. Some enslaved people were known to use secret names and pet names when away from the presence of authorities, and many of them gave their children dignified names that they associated with powerful people and religious figures. Africans who were not enslaved but who lived in legal or social liminality that could easily lead to re-enslavement enacted a more formal process of monastic resistance. Often give abbreviated versions of common European names such as Will or Tom or Min and Jin and Sarah for women, who frequently change their names to William or Thomas or Jennifer or Sarah upon, oh my gosh, manumission. Historian Irene Berlin suggested that in such situations, renaming symbolized, quote, personal liberation and political defiance. It reversed the enslavement process and confirmed the free black person newly won liberty, just as the loss of an African name had earlier symbolized enslavement. Further, hold on a second. Hold on. Further, many among the emancipated adopted last names that they deemed significant, including, quote, Freeman, Washington, and others. Interestingly, some African names, especially Sambo, reminded them of derisive slave names, with the exception of Kafi in all of its various spellings. African names waned as black people sought political empowerment within the dominant system. However, African appellations and naming practices did not lose their significance altogether. Instead, Africans in the United States have applied their traditional customs to European nomenclature. For black activists during the 1960s and 1970s, these lessons made several issues clear. First, Africans and people from various racial and cultural groups believed that a name embodied the very essence of one's being and aligned a person with his or her ancestors. Europeans intentionally stripped enslaved Africans of their ancestral names in order to render them into dehumanized and depersonalized chattel, detached from meaningful genealogies, and with hopes of controlling their thoughts and actions. Second, hold on a second, take off my shoes. Don't bug me. Second, Black Power activists comprehended this process of dehumanization, depersonalization, and domination as an act of aggression, and thus one aspect of war in which they engage as soldiers. Third, as part of their strategy to combat, let me go look up this word. Filial, dude to daughter or something. Okay, filial. They're having the names with me today, aren't they? Filial, an estrangement of oppression. African descended people's names choices were central to how they affirm their humanity and maintain ancestral ties and diasporic connection. During the Black Power era, when African Americans sought to renew their relationship with Africa and consciously choose to embrace various aspects of African culture rather than assimilate into the mainstream American, reconsidered their names, empowered both individuals and the large collective. For many new Africans, the other Black Power activists, the process of abandoning a European name for one of their choosing occasioned a critical juncture in the development of their Black radical identity and indicated their acceptance of a nationalist or Pan-Africanist political ideology. However, the move was not without precedent. The Nation of Islam, NOI, helped bridge the gap between Black people's conditions under American apartheid and, let me go look up this word now too, everybody. We're at that. Oh God, don't do that. Oh my gosh. I did the thing. Hold on, where is it at? Settings. Comment settings. Boom. All right, back on. There we go. We're back on now. We're back on. Oh, where was I looking up? Okay, I think that was it. However, the move was not without precedent. Oh, yeah, I already read that. And their use of names with European origins. Prodigal children. Let me make sure I got that right name. Okay, I was right. Prodigal children, and the NOI's influence in name choices during the Black Power era. Your number in prison became a part of you. You never hear your name, only your number. On all of our clothing, every item was your number, stenciled. It grew stenciled in my brain. El Haji Malik El Shabazz. Shabaz's statement about his prison number parallels how many of his contemporaries understood their own personal family's name. The process of programming prison inmates, slaves, according to the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, to identify with their prison number correspond with the seasoning enslaved Africans underwent during their transformation into legal chattel. After realizing that anti-Black oppression facilitated his path to prison and obtaining that number, Malcolm Little rejected his mental enslavement and embraced the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. In the message to the black man in America, Muhammad urged that so-called black people, quote, be given names of their forefathers whose names are the most holy and righteous name of Allah, end quote, and insisted, quote, that resolving their identity is one of the first and most important truths to be established by God himself, end quote. Malcolm X sought his, quote, holy and righteous name, end quote, as he worked tirelessly to help other African Americans understand overcome their mental enslavement. The Nation of Islam was the most influential black organizations to draw clear connections between the political and spiritual properties of names and to call for the rejection of slave names. During the 1950s and early 1960s, Malcolm X played a pivotal role in the transformation of black political consciousness and activism because of the sheer number of people who considered themselves disciples of his praxis. His own personal transformation was recollected in his speeches and in his posthumously published autobiography, providing his political progeny and model of evolutionary change to identify with as they underwent their own their self-transformation. In 1952, Malcolm Little exchanged his surname for the letter X to symbolize his transition from a self-hating black person to a self-defined black man. His adoption of the X signified a dual recognition of his unknown ancestral name and his departure from the life of criminality. At the time, he had just finished a prison sentence for the number of robbery convictions compounding by his, quote, his sexual relationship with his woman. Sorry, everybody. His decision to drop his slave name indicated that he gave up the lifestyle that led to his incarceration. Instead of engaging in theft, gambling, and shrugs, Malcolm X pursued knowledge and self and served Allah's will through his commitment to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the NOI. Perhaps more important, he adhered to the belief that his slave name, like his previous lifestyle, rendered him subservient to the will of the, quote, white man, which was antithetical to the teachings of the NOI. Attaining an X then symbolized his decision to become an independent thinker who would help black people gain their liberation. Malcolm's experience with naming encompassed much more time and space than his incarceration or experience with the Nation of Islam. As a child growing up in Michigan, he remembered being called the N-word and an R-word, which I'm not going to say. And it's not the ableist, it's just another word that I don't know. I'm going to look it up just to, it seems like it'd be one, but let me look. Yeah, that second word is racist, particularly against black men. Okay, we won't say that. By his wife's teacher, and that word by his white teachers and classmates. As a hustler in Boston, In Harlem, he earned such nicknames as Detroit Red, while in Charleston State Prison and other prisoners referred to him as the malevolent inmate, as Satan, before he underwent his personal transformation and flirted with calling himself Malachi Shabazz. Even though his ex endures in history and public memory, some of his Nigerian associates endowed him with the name Omowell, and he finally accepted the name Elijah Malik El Shabazz before assassins took his life. All of the names mentioned here mark the important phases of a personal transformation. They took on even more significance due to Shabazz's iconic status and representation as someone who, from a historical oppressed group, who decided to reclaim and redefine his identity on his own terms. A mixture of politics and spirituality provided compelling reasons for rethinking a name. Rather, they scratched through the Hebrew scriptures or studied with the NOI, people altered their personal designations and rejected their surnames in response to what they interpreted through their religious faith or spiritual institutions as a higher calling. Their calling was typically tied to an important socio-political objective. Shabazz provided an interesting example of this tendency. Although the various monikers he assumed or received during different stages of his life signified his growth and evolution, the name he assumed as a NOI convert is exceptional, primarily because of the ideology in which it rests. Reiterating Elijah Muhammad's assertions, the NOI believed that maintaining slave names kept African people as psychological captives of white supremacy. Such people could not determine their best culture, political, and socioeconomic interest. In their attempts to undermine the arrangement, the NOI required prospective members to submit letters to Muhammad, expressing their desire to reclaim their heritage and religion. The correspondent requests that Muhammad give him or her an original name, quote unquote. Members of the NOI scrutinized these letters and upon approval furnished the personal request membership with an X. The X stood in for the person's identified original name, which the person could receive only from Allah. Therefore, the X represents a traditional space between one's former slave name and the original name. Many black people also adopted new appellations in an attempt to reunite with any obtainable portions of their African ancestry. According to Minister Malcolm, quote, the devil white man cut enslaved Africans off from any knowledge of their own language, religion, past culture, until the black man in America was the earth's only race who had absolutely no knowledge of their true identity, end quote, and quote, that no longer even knew their true family names, end quote. If those people's knowledge of their past symbolized and refined dehumanization and oppression, then regaining their knowledge accomplished a crucial aspect of empowerment and a significant step in the process of liberation. A transformation of Eli Haji Malachi El Shabazz and other followed what psychologist William C. Cross identified in the 1971 as a black person to black conversion experience. They used the N-word before that. In crossing original models and its various aversions, he claimed African Americans underwent various evolutionary phases or fit into various identity clusters. Jesus. Each representing a stage in psychological development in their progression towards embracing their blackness. One phase and pre-encountered included the total acceptance of everything European and the denial of racism impact on African Americans, in contrast to internalization identity cluster involving a nuanced analysis of European/Western hegemony. In between the two aforementioned stages was that cross-termed the immersion and emergent identity cluster. This is weird. This juncture was particularly important because it constituted the point when a, quote, convert underwent an extreme identity change and embraced all things African or black. People in this identity cluster often decided to take on a new name as they intended to disassociate from European culture. In this context, name changes represent a critical moment in a black to black conversion, which they use the N-word before they use black, conversion experience during which individuals accepted fully an identity they had determined for themselves. Several Black Power activists, including many who considered themselves disciples of Shabazz, rationalized name changes according to a logic that paralleled Cross's explanatory models. As one member of the US organization, the U's organization told Newsweek reporters, although, quote, with some people it's just a fad, with most it's a step along the way of consciousness and understanding of self. That reasoning resonated with more than just activists. African people in the United States and abroad found it important to reject the monikers they received in the context of oppression in favor of sobriquets. What the heck? Sobriquets. Let me go look up this name. Oh, I did it again. Jesus Christ. Comment setting. That's on. Thank God. All right, let me go look at this name. Where did it go? Oh my gosh, not to do this picture thing. All right, where'd the thing go? I cannot find it. Where's that damn word at? There it is, found it. All right, be right back. Sobriquets, and it's a person's nickname. That's what it says. Sobriquets, and often legally changed names that projected their connections with their real or imagined ancestor. Guyana novelist and critical essayist Ayi Koyi Amira articulated such logic behind shedding European names. In his renowned novel 2000 Seasons, he wrote, here's what he wrote. He wrote, "It is the white man's wish to take us from our way. We ourselves are so far already from our way, to move us onto their road, to void us of all soul, and put their spirits, the worships of their creature God, in us. They say it will be reward. They say it will be reward enough when we have lost our way completely, lost even our names. When you will call your brother not Ole but John, not Kofi but Paul, and our sisters will no longer be Amin or Naiti or Adawa and Nangomi, but creatures called Cecilia, Esther, Mary, Elizabeth, and Christina. The white men want us to obliterate our remembrance of our way, the way, and in its place to follow their road of destruction. The ideas expressed by Amira, the NOI, and Shabazz found their way into the rhetoric and lived experience of Black Power movement activists who sought to liberate Black people from all vestige of European culture, of Euro-American culture, and political domination, understanding themselves as African peoples rather than Black people, which is they use the N-word for Black people, or simply Americans. These women and men carried on legacies and resistance that their ancestors first put into practice. The new African name stories. Here we go. In 1969, what time is it? We're good. In 1969, Amir Obadel gave 14-year-old Bernadette Teleferraro the name, Shoshana. During the naming ceremony, she found that the name, which means rose, was in use among some Native Americans and has roots in Hebrew. Around that same time, her oldest brother chose the name Shakur, which they understood as one who directs the way. For himself, Shoshana and their sister. They soon learned that another family member, Chokwe, had already chosen the name Lumumba for himself. When the family's youngest sibling became Republic of New Africa cadres, they took on that name. When explaining why she took on her new names, she recited the claims about African people losing their original names when European enslaved them. She explains, "I could see someone who is fighting for liberation of their people and their slaves and their identity to take on a new name," end quote. Because it was impossible to find out or take on the exact identity and names lost through violence. And next best option was to recreate oneself. The name symbolized the new creation. Resistance to culture and political domination through name choices revealed one aspect of new African lifestyle politics. Some people embrace African names to confirm an African identity that was complicated by the unique history of captive and resistance in North America. Although altering one's name might seem minute, New Africans, such modifications echoed large arguments regarding black people's rights to choose their own nationality after being properly informed about why and how to make that choice. In this sense, New African name choice signified an activist pride in their ancestral heritage and their desire to obtain New African liberation. However, some people decide not to replace their enslaved names. The rationale behind such decisions further complicate the connection between identity of self-determination and liberation in ways that resist one's dimensional understanding of Black Power era and nomenclature. Finally, some activists who did change their names discarded them or had them revoked. These various situations clarify the matrix of self-determination and power, along with significance of gender norms as they and other social constructs intersects with the different views activists held about their legitimacy as revolutionaries. During the Black Power era, various individuals and groups contemplated the proper identity African Americans should assume. Among these activists, Stokely Carmichael considered all black people Africans who should seek a land base on the continent of Africa. During the early 1970s, he took the first name Kwame in honor of Guianan former head of state Kwame Nkrumah. He adopted Toure from the last name in Guinea, President Sékou Touré. Although some people shared Touré's opinion on African Americans' identity and Pan-Africanism, the people who gave life to the new African independence movement contended that African Americans here were no longer Africans in the geographic or strict culture sense of the term. Because they considered themselves a captive nation within the hegemonic state, those ancestors developed practices and outlooks formed through the amalgamation of African culture, retentions, acculturation under European domination, and life in a new land. It was difficult for successive generations to identify completely with the diversity of the continental African society. Nations and cultures in Africa have evolved between the 16th and 19th century due in part to the changes that occur through the great contact with Europeans and Asians, including the global traffic in Africans and the forces of colonialism. In contrast to activists like Toure, Republic of New Africa leaders argued that African Americans should identify as New Africans, a people who though radically black or African, embodied a republic distinct from other African nations and certainly between both from the body politic constituted by their white American counterparts. As part of this understanding, the New African identity and their global political positioning, Republican New African citizens often shed their slave names in favor of African ones. RNA documentation contains an array of ideas that illustrate the provincial government Republican New Africans' flexibility for formal designation. In the letter to citizens during the constitutional crisis in 1970, Brother Gaddy requested that people reply and provide spaces for respondents to provide both their slave names and traditional names. In addition, the adult application of the RNA furnished lines for one's assumed name as well as slave name. RNA citizens considered changing their names to symbols of their commitment to New African liberation, and many of them did. However, some New Africans chose to hold on to birth names for legal and sentimental purposes, and others concluded that assuming an African name was not necessary, that the PG RNA made space in printing documents for both kinds of names, underscores the varying opinions among the New African on the topic of nomenclature. Yeah. Although I'm going to find out, where am I at? 107. Hold on, let's see where. Oh my God. Gosh, there's no stopping point for a while. Holy crap. 107. The next stopping point is 119. Oh my God. 107. Back to 107. Jesus. Erg. That sucks. Let's see where I get. Alright. Back to 107. Sorry, everybody. Although taking on a new name was not a requirement for New Africans, plenty of them decided to adopt one. Such people found or were giving their names in situations and processes as multifaceted and diverse as New Africans themselves. Many received their names, as did Shoshonan, Shakur, and Bokaba Trace, from elders or respected community members. Some found their names in books created for that purpose, and others came to them from studying African history and cultures. In at least one case, a New African developed his name through years of careful consideration and internal exploration. Oh my gosh. Ayinglo Ferguson, like many other New Africans from the 1960s, received her name from Nana Asujamin Adefinama, and Yoruba priest and co-founder of the provincial government. The religious leaders, and I'm destroying these names, everybody, the religious leader presented her with the name during a naming ceremony. Oh my gosh. Alilalua means mother of the people. The two-term People's Center Council, PCC, chair explained, quote, may greatest honor is that Babi gave me that name, and that Queen Mary Moore also was Yayulia, and oh my gosh, and I already feel that was a great honor to me. The theme of honor in receiving an African name found its way into name story of Dr. Nigeria Jackson. She recalled. Wait, is Miriam in the thing? No one's in here to lift Miriam up? Sorry, Miriam. My bad. She recalled this sentimental delight the day a group of children named her during a Kwanzaa festival. The children were concerned that she lacked an African name. After being promoted by their teacher, they quote, talked about who I was and how I was the wife of, quote, Michael Finney, quote, a warrior who helped hijack a plane in Cuba 1 month prior, quote, and 1 month prior, quote, so the kids had been studying there were a lot of naming books out in the late 60s, and so the children said, quote, we want her to be Nigeria, I can't say it, Nejra, one deserving of a warrior. Because the children, quote, named me, I took it and I kept it. So I am Nigeria. I can't say the damn word. It's the NJ that just destroys how to do it. That's it. I take my name. That's the that the children gave Jackson a name that she used for the remainder of her life speaks to a communal significance of names for some of the people who were entrenched in New African community. People like Jackson believed that by taking on an African name, they connected with their immediate communities and their global counterparts, past and present. However, not everyone who became conscious Republic of New African citizens or who established intimate relationships with New Africans found it necessary to change their name. Although to some, quote, it was pretty much customary, end quote, where Ayoola Ferguson decided to use her African name regularly. Her husband Herman felt that he should refrain from employing his name, like Mama, oh my gosh, Ayilayu Nana Asijaman gave him his name. Oh my gosh, these names are killing me. Adequya Akinwo. During the naming ceremony, however, Ferguson developed some reservation about using the name and about practice of renaming more generally. He recalled, quote, I felt that there was a wave of name changes. A lot of things were happening back in those days, that were culturally nationalism, and I didn't consider myself a cultural nationalist. My idea of a nationalist was purely and fully political. Further, he believed that one should receive a new name after they have proven themselves politically. He maintained, quote, that the person who took that name had achieved a certain status. They had earned that right. Baba Herman's instincts between culture nationalism and political nationalism illustrates a point of contention. Black activists debated during the late 1960s as various groups and individuals included David Hilliard and Muluna Karenga made similar differentiations between their theories and strategies for Black liberation. The distinctions represented fundamentally divergent views about the best methods for achieving their goal. On the other hand, cultural nationalists, who are often presented by Karenga and the US organization, argued, quote, we must free ourselves culturally before we can succeed politically. In other words, African-descended people in the United States had to undergo a process of mental decolonization before they could wage a successful revolution against white supremacy and oppression. Because ideological leaders such as Karenga claimed, quote, the culture revolution gives identity, purpose, and direction. Some of their contemporaries perceived cultural nationalists as neglecting grassroots organizing. Historian Scott Brown suggested that the relatively small membership of us as U.S. contributed to the perception, but also points out that many culture nationalists did indeed participate in more visible aspects of political organizing. On the other hand, the Black Panther Party typically represented political or revolutionary nationalists and claimed to be more concerned with addressing the concrete political condition that left Black people susceptible to oppression. Former Black Panther David Hilliard wrote, quote, we call our position revolutionary nationalism, as opposed to cultural nationalism, which limits the struggle of self-determination to the appearance and the Shikas, African names talk about new nationhood and the Black nation. He distinguished between, quote, steeping ourselves in African past and folklore as a goal, claiming instead that revolutionaries aligned themselves with other liberation fighters and those movements that wage armed political struggle against oppressive capitalists. Quote, we are We are about gaining economic and political freedom. He added, quote, after that, worry about what you call yourself, end quote. Hilliard's comrade Huey P. Newton maintained a similar position. He argued that culture, or quote, pork chop nationalism, was insufficient because he did not see it as being rooted in socialist perspectives or any other than socialist perspectives, which caused potential revolutionaries to be reactionary, thus prompting them to replace one's repressive regime with another. Newton used Hattie's Papa Doc as an example of someone who was pro-black, quote, which on the surface seems very good, but for him it is only a mislead of people. He merely kicked out the races and replaced them with himself as the oppressor. With that situation unfolding as black nationalists were developing their liberation movement, he feared that many of his contemporaries in the United States were pursuing similar goals. Such differences in theoretical perspectives sometimes lead people from opposing viewpoints to, oh my gosh, enmity and violence. Even as others seem to negotiate the position, the Black Panther Party, rivalry is instructive as a culminated in the deaths of Panthers. Oh my gosh, these guys are killing me with the words today. Alprintence. What? Oh my God, the words.
هدية يا عمو gift بليز أخي ساعدني هدية يا عمو بليز gift.
As well as the unrest and conviction of us members, George and Larry Watana Stenner. Of course, political differences alone were not enough to cause this bout of violence or to provoke other brutal episodes. FBI instigation, pre-existing turf battles between members within the organization, and many other elements contributed to the severe deterioration of the US-Panther relationship. Some Black Power activists deemed it wise to combine the tactics of ideologies and culture and political nationalism. The House of Umoja and the New York Black Panther Party and African People's Party and Amir Baraka's Congress of African People, among other formations, either argued explicitly for the practice elements from both tendencies. In fact, as Langston Hughes, W.E.B. Du Bois, Angela Davis, Larry Neal, and others contended before and during the Black Power era, culture, especially as operationalized by the oppressed group to undermine its oppressors. And the reverse is also true and inherently political. Herman Ferguson's stance on who deserves to use an African name another important dimension and nomenclature issue. During the 1960s and 70s, Black people of all political persuasion took on names that signified their connection with their ancestors, reflecting their social political ideas and or illustrate some aspects of their spiritualities. Although one may one may like to believe that everyone active in political struggle remains steadfast to their beliefs. There were certainly activists who stood in an insincere and sometimes fraudulent relations to the ideas put forth by the groups and organization in which they participated. Some men and women may have been attracted solely to the style and infamy associated with Black power politics and culture. Others became involved as informants at the behest of local and national legal authorities. Where are we at? 9 more pages? Jesus. In fact, one of the people to whom Yoruba priest Nana, Osinjeman gave the name supplied information with Herman Ferguson to the FBI testifying against him in court. Therefore, it should not come as too much of a surprise that Ferguson deemed it necessary to for participants to prove their dedication to the movement before using African names. Yet, given Ferguson's close association with El Hajjah Malaka Shabazz involvement with the revolutionary action movement of the Provisional Government Republic of New Africa and his experience as a target of several repressive actions from the 1960s to the 1990s, it is difficult to understand why he did not think he had earned the right to use, here we go, Abikoi, which indicates that one has valor or courage. While people like Herman Ferguson believed in pertinent to fulfill some prerequisite conditions in order to earn the African name, other supplies remained content with the designation their parents gave them at birth. In fact, former PCC chair Marilyn Killingham refused to get rid of her birth name. She append, quote, Marilyn is derivative of Mary, and my mother's name was Mary, and she changed the Y to an I and added Lyn. She's an African warrior, and I'm named after her. And I guess if Jesus was black, which he is, then I guess his mother Mary would have to be too. Okay. However, her justification for holding on to her given name is significant because it highlights the reasoning of activists who value their inheritance of appellations shared by people who made significant contributions to the lives of others despite having names identified with their former slave masters. Killingham considered her mother an African warrior whose name she proudly bore. Further, her name held great spiritual significance for her, too. As a devout Christian, she associated the name Mary with one of the most important figures of her faith. Even though the Republic of New Africa never mandated that New Africans shed their slave names, Killingham explained that she had to defend her decision to keep hers. In a culture that sought to disassociate itself from the vestige of oppression, people probably placed great pressures on her and others to take on an African name. Killingham's possession of an African warrior named is significant because her inheritance seems to contradict what some perceive as the prevailing gender convictions. Assata Shakur wrote, women's names were nothing like men's names, which meant things like strong, warrior, man, or iron, brave, etc. The proliferation among black women of names like Aminia or Marania, which I cannot say people's names to save my life, which respectively mean peaceful or charming, presumably affirms Asada's assertion. In addition, some women appellations denoted generally heteronormative features and femininity, such as being a mother or wife. However, at least, how many more pages? However, at least some new African women adopted and gave her children strong names such as Fuluna or Nefertiti, or is that Nefertiti? Or Asanatua. I can't say these names. Designations shared by warriors and rulers. Oh my gosh, here we go, another name. Nangzinga, taken from the 16th century military leader who successfully resisted the Portuguese occupation and her land and enslavement of her people for over 30 years. Many have also gained popularity among black women of the era. Yet dominant gender conventions persisted insofar as more men than women seemed to take on warrior names, or, oh my gosh, sobriquets that held great military significance, naming names associated with soldiers and hunters, including Balagun and Chaka, in all of their various spellings, as well as Camu and Odanga and Sundata. Oh my gosh. Enjoyed preeminence in the era during which some black men strove to overturn what they consider historical emasculation. Sorry, I am destroying these words nonstop. I know you give that, but I can never do it. See, I can't do it. I need someone to say the name sometimes. I'm frustrated with myself, not with anything else, to be honest. Strong military names also guarantee heightened significance because they suggested an unwillingness to engage in warfare. Because black people are a historically oppressed group, black people's assumption of equalities associated with predecessors whose acumen on the battlefield gained them greater respect and fear constituted another important aspect of cognitive liberation. Such honorable appellations endowed bearers with the responsibilities to live up to the characteristics of their names in the war against white supremacy and the battle for land and reparations and the contest of independence. Having a name associated with African warriors like Killigam, that sense of responsibility, like Mama Killigam, some men selected warrior names with a similar sense of responsibility to hold the characteristics embedded in them. One such man was Hannibal Tyrus Afrique, a highly respected New African born in the mid-1930s. Afrique came from a poor family, earned scholarships to get him enough Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio, and climbed the U.S. military ranks to the position of officer. In the process of obtaining middle-class American comforts, he decided that African people in the United States could not be free until they achieved political independency and destroy white supremacy and capitalist hegemony. This belief inspired him to get involved with the provincial government, Republic of New Africa, when he explained his reasons for accepting his current name. He mentioned that Hannibal, the annihilators, quote, exploits are legendary, end quote. He was, quote, but the greatest military strategizer in the history of warfare, end quote. The New African reported Tyrus Afrique, quote, was reputedly the head of the Zingo thousands of years ago. The Universal, the N word, which an O, Improvement Association documented that's where the red, black, and green first flew 10,000 years ago in the area of Northwest Africa, which is now northern Mauritania. Because his valued students named him, he took pride in it and lived his life trying to fulfill the expectation that came with the name. Bambi Hannibal's full name instilled in him the responsibilities to the military adherent and to embody great leadership. Further, his name placed him in a succession of mighty men, beginning with ancestors from the time far gone up to the participants of the 20th century Garvey movement. Africa's full name did not originate in a single region of Africa. Instead, it connected him with Africans from the Mediterranean world and West Africa, in addition to Marcus Garvey, the Jamaican-born organizer who built one of the world's largest black organizations to date. Living up to the reputation associated with his name as a taller, older Bamba Hannibal proudly worked to fulfill in his personal life, in his public activities, and through his spiritual practices. Well known and widely respected New African Chakwi Lumumba began his association with the provincial government Republic of New Africa during his summer break from Kalamazoo College in Michigan. His name, like Afric's, associated him with African military history and leadership. Regarding this association, he explained to Chakwi means hunter, and it was the name of an African nation that white folks would call a tribe which exists during the slave trade. Oh my gosh, just lost. They opposed and fought valiantly against human traffickers in the northeast region to present present-day Anglo. Chakwi were also known for their arts. Quote, they were one of the ones who started performance where they hold up masks. They hold up masks to be different characters. A lot of people think the Greeks started that, but it was the Chakwi. Next, Lumumba means gifted. It was inspired by Patrice Lumumba. So it is Lumumba. I thought it was something else. The assassinated leader who helped the Democratic Republic of Congo transition to independency. So, my name's significant because I've chosen a name which represents some of the last resistance to the slave trade before slave trade pretty much in Africa. And Lumumba, which was one of the first revolutionaries who began to bring Africa back to its independence. Taken together, one may translate Chakwi Lumumba as gifted hunter, but the name also represents the nation of the brother that had important roles in our liberation struggle against white supremacy and for independence. As with Afric Lumumba's explanation of his African name contains the themes of military significance and leadership and hunting skills. Interestingly, he is not necessarily concerned with military success or failures of the nation whose name he bears. Rather, he lewd their resistance against human trafficking. Further, Chakwi gained the reputation for hunting elephants, trading in ivory, and other artistic contributions to the world. This combination of feature demonstrates the well-rounded nature of the nation's culture. Finally, Lumumba's desire to embody traits affiliated with the person and icon of Patrice Lumumba originated from his aspirations to help the Republic of New Africa achieve political dependency from the United States in much the same way the Congo leader attempted to do so for his own country. The African leader enjoyed wide admiration from African Americans during the 1960s and 1970s, partly because he attempted to build post-colonial Congo without the intervention of Western nations, and because his enemies overthrew him with the help of the CIA. Alongside this tendencies to elect designations loaded with gender specificity, many new African women and men took on names with gender-neutral connotations that signify one's relationship with the Creator and reminded the individuals of her and or his personal life purpose. Some names conveyed new African bearers' willingness to struggle for their goals. In this case of new African independence and the destruction of white supremacy, oppression, and worldwide. Assata Shakur's name is instructive, as she explained her married name, Chesamerd, constantly remind her of the pain of the pain Europeans inflicted upon her ex-husband's ancestors. She recalls rethinking about the name's origins and how Chesamerd in Martinique beat and raped his human property. She wondered, quote, how many black babies he had fathered and how many black people he had been responsible for unaliving. Before deciding to relinquish the name at some point, and still Joanna Chesamerd requested an African name while attending a festival hosted by New Africans. She received, Yabuma Obadel. In Shakur's recollection, I liked the way it sounded, soft and musical, kind of happy sounding. However, though she requested an African name and initially felt content with what she was given, she promptly forgot about it after a few days because she never felt any particular connection with it. As she came closer to obtaining her present name, Assata Obagalabo, I can't say it, Shakur. I can't even say Shakur correct. She decided, She decided that she wanted a strong name that aptly described her and her purpose. She insisted that it have, quote, something to do with the liberation of our people, and decided on Assata Odagalabala Shakur. Oh my gosh, I can't say it. Assata means she who struggles. I can't say it. Means it's Olugbala, means love for the people. And I took the name Shakur out of the respect of Zadie and Zadie's family. Shakur means the thankful. In Shakur's case, the significance of choosing name is multifaceted. On the one hand, Assata found a name that embraced that she believed to be her purpose, namely to struggle for her people. On the other hand, it encompassed her connection to the particular political family with whom she developed a strong bond. Although she did not do so in her biography, one could read her entire name in a manner similar to how Chakui Lumumba interpret his name. That is to say, Shakur's full name may indicate her thankfulness for being given the responsibility of struggling for the people whom she loves. Her dedication to that struggle ultimately led to her violent arrest and imprisonment, torture, and exile to another country away from her family, comrades, and daughter. Assata's experience of receiving a name during a ceremony or ritual was not uncommon. Bokuba Trace pointed out that the provincial government, Republic of New Africa, regularly presented new cadres with African names at various events and celebrations. He recalls that in his experience, it was a popular thing to do, but particularly for the young folks that were coming into the movement back then, and even some of the young adults. It was pretty much customary shedding their slave names and adopting their African names. At first glance, Trey's comments may reflect a lack of political consciousness on the part of the Republic of New African recruits, who assumed African names and suggest that adopting African names was simply a popular or trendy activity. Gosh, I'm burping up too much. As obtained, an African name exhibited in certain fashionableness at the time, or could be classified as a fade, according to Herman Ferguson. It is possible that the young Bukadba did not situate the act of taking on an African name within the full context of black people's struggles for liberation. However, his statement provokes several questions. For whom was adopting African names popular? In that context, was the practice of taking on an African name customary? Trace began to answer such questions when he stated that naming ceremonies were big things back then, when in the late 60s and early 70s. They are a regular part of Kwanzaa programming and would occur during Malcolm X Day celebration and other cultural and political gatherings. Trace account suggests that black nationalists who collectively participate in activities aimed at re-Africanizing or perhaps new Africanizing Detroit's black population helped popularize the practice in acquiring an African name. In that context, even if Trace initially failed to understand the full significance of assuming his African name, his participation in black nationalist activities and intentional engagement with elders and peers who actively pursue liberation demonstrate that acquire an African name represented more than just a trend. Further, the meaning of his acquired name signified his desire to contribute to Black Revolution. Joining the Republic of New Africans Black Legion was an additional gesture that confirmed his development and consciousness. Other legionnaire, Balogun Anderson, first received his African name in the late 1960s from a friend who found it in a book. He divulged that, Balogun, quote, in West Africa pretty much means warlord. That's the meaning of it, warlord. In the Republic, man, I was just a, quote, citizen soldier, end quote. In addition to reflecting the gender norms undergirding Black Power era New African name choice, Anderson contemplation of his name also revealed his salient practice of attaining appellations that identify bearers as both individuals and members of a larger community. Further, because community played a pivotal role in the giving, receiving, and accepting of names, Anderson later participation in the naming ceremony benefited his alignment with the broader collective. Consequently, I can't say the damn word. Hold on, everybody. I couldn't say coincidentally. Oh no. What page was I on? Oh my god, it jumped to 245. What? How did that happen? What page was I on? Anybody know? Anybody know what page I was on, please? What page was I on? I need help. Anybody, what page was I on? Please help me. Page? Hello? Page 115. Okay. Where was I at on 115? Why did it do that? Okay, there we go. In addition to reflecting on the gender norms under the Black Panther Party, New African name choice Anderson in complementation of his name, also appellation in the bearers of the both individual community. Further, because the community played a pivotal role in giving and receiving and accepting names, Anderson later participated in a naming ceremony benefiting his alignment with the broader collective. Coincidentally, during the naming ceremony, he received his name a second time. This time from Nana. Oh my gosh. Osajiman Adafunamai, can't say the name. He remembered, quote, "We were having a conference of," oh my gosh, Baba Osajimanai, I can't say the name, who was a Yoruba priest that gave me a reading. Yeah. That gave me a reading, and I didn't tell him that somebody had already selected a name for me and told me that was my name through the readings, like Shankur, who could not connect with her given name. Anderson and Trace felt attached to theirs and used them regularly. As the experience of Trace and Anderson illustrates, some new Africans took on new names for reasons other than needing to disconnect from the oppressor culture. They and others acquired African appellations in the spirit of building communal relationships and developing their involving political identities. Therefore, their motives were as sentimental as they were political. What is more, some Republican New African citizens who received new names held on in part or in whole to their slave names. For example, Trace did not use his African middle and last name for long, nor did he completely stop using his birth name, Richard. The fact that some Africans did not rid themselves of every nominal vestige of slavery is as significant as attempts at total disassociation. General, oh my gosh, here we go. Kurantabeshia Ali X Rashad provides a useful example of this tendency, albeit with some qualification. He maintained his X, a stand-in for the unknown aspects of his heritage, which had become part of his identity. It was something that he felt he had earned because of his experience within the NIO. He further explained that, oh my gosh, Kuratabishia is Swahili and equates with, quote, servant of the people. Ali means servant of Allah. And Rashid says that I'm opposed to be wise. I'm supposed to be wise. Even though he compiled several African and Arabic names that spoke to his political and religious ideas, he indicated, quote, I don't know I don't own my slave name, but I don't deny it either, end quote. Rashid never felt the need to completely drop his slave name, although he stopped using it. For him, the slave name is just as much as part of him as the X he assumed when he joined the NIO in his Kaswilia and Arabic names that project his purpose and personal attributes. I'm trying to get to the thing. I'm almost there. I know. All of his names reveal the identity he bore since birth and eliminated the qualities he strove to embody as he learned more about himself and his decided purpose. Or as Republic of New African Citizens, oh my gosh, Jumana Matsuya stated very simply with regard to his own name, well, everything that we were, we still are. In other words, even as people grow and evolve, they cannot dismiss the personal history that precedes their revolutionary activism and acquisition of African names. For that reason, New Africans like General Rashid refuse to deny those aspects of their lives, involving the learning from their past lives and histories remained most important to such revolutionaries as they continue to struggle for liberation. The theme of maintaining a sense of personal history presents itself in the name story told by African lawyer, oh my gosh, here we go, Nakachi Tafa Eski Q, the child of two educators, and the name Anita Caldwell at birth. Tafa found an Igbo appellation, oh my gosh, Nachi, which means gift of God. In a book, when she was 16 years old, was the president of her high school's Black Student Union. She thought that the development of her black consciousness necessitated her adoption of an African name. A few years later, after involving herself with the PGRNA, she also took the surname of, oh my gosh, Anjanaku, which she defined as struggling for liberation of all African people until victory or unaliving. However, she discovered that the oh my gosh, I can't say this. Polyamorous family. Oh my gosh. Hold on, I'll be right back. I know. I'm over and over, but I'm trying. It was polygamous. Polygamous family in Tennessee also employed the names, and because she disagreed with polygamy, she decided to discontinue using it. At one point, she married a man whose name was Owasiya. However, she never took his or anyone's name through marriage. Finally, she settled on using the name Tafu, which means nation in Swahili. Over the several years during which she underwent this evolution, Tafu, and like Trace, Anderson, Rashid, and others, never completely rejected the name she received at birth. Instead, she legalized her African name in order to use it in her professional endeavors. Brother D.B., oh my gosh, Amua Nabuyan, I can't say the name, identified herself with different names at different moments in her life, although for different reasons than those explained earlier. As a youth, she temporarily adopted the name, oh my gosh, Minas Shakan Argu, oh my gosh, Arungu. She adopted MENIS from the first pharaoh's site credited with uniting Upper and Lower Egypt. Right. The legendary 19th century Zulu warrior from current day South Africa inspired him to take on Shaka. Finally, oh my gosh, Arungos is a Swahili word for organizer. Brother D recalled that an acquaintance who was in the 5% nation of gods and earth understood the names to mean the first and last who set in order. No one regarded him by that name. Getting closer, everybody. Two more. After more thought and reflection, Brother D, quote, felt the need to have a chosen name. However, he felt attracted to diminutions other than those who with strict African origins. Instead, he confers, if someone who had never spoke was to open their mouth to utter a sound that would stand for everything, A is a sound that you don't have to do anything with your tongue, your mouth, you know? You just open your mouth and let that out. But I was like, you can't be a. So I was like, okay, well, if I were to open my mouth and then shut it and open it again, you get Amia. I think that's what I'm doing, right? Then I went through some spelling changes before coming up with the name Amia. So that's where Amia came from. Using this sound as meaning everywhere, everything, or originally put forward. One who has a basic understanding of the universe, and then modify that in years to follow. So I was using that as my last name. So I was Daryl B. Amia. So that's late 1967 and 69 when I got married. We didn't agree with the idea of the woman taking the man's last name. So we chose a family name. That was Nabuya. And so Amia became my middle name. Daryl Amia Nabuyan. And somewhere over the years I began put the B back in there. And I was Daryl B. Davis, and then Daryl B. Amia. And then Daryl Amia, oh my gosh, Nabiyan. And I was like resurrecting my middle initial, and so A.B. Amia Abuyan. Although he did not initially connect his name with African Brother D, he eventually learned that the Dagon of modern day Mali was the name of Amia to signify the creator. This insight struck him as particularly significant because even though Malayans spell the name differently, he developed an admiration for their intellectual achievements and spirituality. Also of importance was Brother D's willingness to ignore, if not circumvent, the gender conventions surrounding the last name of married couples. He and his then wife agreed in 1970 not to force the man's name on the woman, which is an arrangement that even in the 20th century has not yet gained much traction in the United States. Further, Brother D's acknowledgement that throughout the world, Amia, regardless of its spelling, oft correlates with a mother's concept, which he's cool with. Finally, the 5% nation of gods on earth influenced much of Brother D's understanding of Amia. The 5%ers are a group of black nationalists whose founder, Father Ali, broke away from the NOI during the mid-60s to start his offshoot. One of their central beliefs is that God is not a spirit that exists outside of the realm of human understanding. Instead, God is embodied by black men. His reconciliation of that knowledge with his growth since his first assumed Amia eventually led him to modify his name, meaning to one who seeks a basic understanding of the universe. Even as they challenged traditional gender norms, Brother D's names demonstrated, two more pages everybody, demonstrated another way that NOI, in this case through the 5 percenters, could influence new African revolutionaries on the personal level. Just as Republic of New African activists gave designations to demonstrate a comrade's belonging in the worth of the black nationalist and or new African community. They also revoke some people's names, though relatively rare on the occasion that someone, quote, sold out and became or was exposed as an informant. Their former community banished the use of their African name, sometimes publicly. In one situation, New Africans discovered that the trusted comrade worked with the federal government to locate and arrest Amutulu Shakur and others who participated in the 1981 Brink expropriation as former House of Yomojo African People's Party member, oh my gosh, Dr. Akinyali Omowale Ojamo Omanjo explained his name was Kwamu, but movement publication referred to him as Peter Milton after he cooperated with prosecutors against his former comrades, as Kumuyo was someone whom Shakur's befriended and treated at his drug rehabilitation clinic. The federal government was able to use the man's dependency to convince him to cooperate with their plan to apprehend movement activists. The movement that gave him the name Kumu decided to revoke it. Once he turned and became a snitch, he called him by his slave name. This may endorse Freeman Ferguson's logic. If a person proved incapable of living up to the responsibility required of a new African revolutionary, that person forfeit the right to recognize by the African name. Personal name choices played formative and foundational roles in individual New African quests for self-determination. First, the practice of demonating symbolized what? I don't know why I'm having problems with words today. It's so fucking wild. Denominating. Jesus Christ. I can't read today. Denominating symbolized New Africans' diasporic African consciousness, their desire to connect with their African ancestry and the political objectives of their black and developing world contemporaries. That consciousness also fosters in them or sustains a sense of responsibility to serve their people. If an individual failed to live up to the responsibilities demanded of the new African revolutionary, other comrades may have chosen to abstain from calling that delinquent by his or her African name. Next, New African name choices arose from Republican New African citizens' relationships within their immediate communities. Such affirmities are significant because they helped reveal why activists dedicate so much energy in rethinking names, and how, coming to an end, various individuals understood their name as the aspect of their community, of their commitment to communally based goals and objectives. The interviews illuminate another theme: the entanglement of political and mental decolonization, and how the various means of individual New African associate with their names facilitated those dual purposes. Finally, most of the New Africans cited previously continued using their slave names even when they took on other ones. Although deemed slave names by some, appellations given at birth were not easily disregarded by many activists, even as they came into New African consciousness. Taking together, New African name choices demonstrate that Black Power era project of identity reconstruction was much more complicated than the desire of Black people to present themselves in a way that made them feel empowered. The focus on identity helped them analyze their socio-political positioning within the global white power structure. They reframed conversations about their place in the world and potential political power they could exercise once they better developed their relationships with other Black people in the United States and the developing world comrades internationally. In other words, identity politics helped create a path for New African independence advocates to develop a complicated and potentially powerful reframing of a global order that minimized the ability of historically oppressed people to act in their own interest. The group's designation, New Africans, help implicate their vision, and strategy. Done. Not done with the book. At a stopping point, finally. That was a long one. I'm sorry, everybody. I went way over. Way over. Way over. It's a long thing there. So it looks like it's important for them for identifying themselves as revolutionaries and wanting liberation by donning off the slave name and donning on a New African name. Some you can see evolved into taking on their name, and some kept the other name because it gave them significance in their identity. And then the whole deal of when people betray, they no longer are able to take on that name. So yeah, wild. You're going your best and great job on holding the reading so your appreciation comes. Thank you. Yeah, so like, doing. You're doing your best. Thank you. Yeah. So that's important. You know, I don't understand that significance, but I can see how it does bring empoweredness, to be empowered with inside yourself. You know what I mean? So I can see that. You know? Yeah, we don't have gifts. I'm sorry. Yeah. So that was good. I think it was good. Bring you up? Why? Why not just gulag you? All right, Rufus. I gotta feed you.